Okay, in today's interview, we're going to be talking about really one of the more fascinating subjects that we can discuss for our freedoms, for our investments, and for our money. And that's, what does Wall Street bets, what does this whole Reddit movement, how is this going to affect our money, our economy, and more importantly, our future of our money moving forward? And today to discuss that, I have, probably one of the best and most thorough researchers on the markets that I like to follow and is, really a friend and mentor, and that's Mark Moss. And he's dove really deep into this subject. How is the government's response? How is this volatility going to affect your investments and the future? And what are the most important ways to be preparing for that? Sounds like a fascinating subject. He also has a live event going up next week. It's live online. I wish it was in person because it'd be fun to be, running live workshops again. But he's going to be breaking down exactly how to prepare financially for this. I'll be on it. It's live, it's free, it's online. The link is in the description right there down below. And it is also pinned to the comments right there down below. So be sure to check out Mark's live event, breaking this down into more detail. Now, also just want to give a special shout out to our channel sponsor, which is Vizsla Silver. So thank you, Vizsla Silver, for being our channel sponsor. Hit the like button on either side, sign up for Mark's free event coming up. And it's good to see you, Mark.
Yeah, Jake, thanks for that intro. Always love talking to you. So I'm excited to get into this. And as you said, man, I can't wait till we can do live in-person events again. It's so much better, but for now, we'll do it this way.
Okay, so we were talking in detail a little bit right before we went on to the recording, and I got a little out of breath on that intro there. So, but you were talking about how what's happening with the Wall Street bets and Reddits. I almost interpret it as you were saying, it's essentially an omen for a clear sign that we're headed towards the end of this cycle of these markets and these financial systems. And I hadn't heard someone really talk about that and the effects that Wall Street and Reddit and all these things could have on our money and our future. So drop right into it. Tell me what's going on and what this has to do with your live event.
Yeah. So, what we've been talking about, you and I have both talked about it a lot on our own channels. We've talked a lot about it together, just offline as well. And which is the Wall Street bets and the Reddit forums and all that. And so we've talked about it at length on both our channels. We don't need to dive super deep into that. But as you said, an omen or a sign, right? It's a sign of where we are in the market cycle. And so, I really got deep into this back in like 2008 when the great financial crash happened, and really became like this gold bug and learned about sound money and how this distortion of our money supply creates all these additional problems. And so I like to talk about the money, the sound money, the need for sound money, and then how it affects us like from a social level, right? On a societal level. And so we understand market cycles and how they move, and they go up and they crash and they kind of come up and crash. And at the end of a market cycle, at the very top, two things happen. One, we typically get like the most parabolic run, what you may call a melt up, or that goes into like a blow off top. But during that time, we get all types of volatility. And so that's obviously what we're seeing right now. We're seeing prices shooting up like crazy. You were just mentioning a stock that you had that went up 85% today in one day. And we're seeing a lot of that happening. But really, this is a bigger thing. So this is like a societal thing, and that's really accelerating this trend. And so on my channel for the last like 2 years, I've been documenting or making videos talking about like the end of the dollar as a reserve currency status, the changing of money. And a lot of people will always ask like, when is it going to happen? Mm-hmm. And the problem is, and as you know, you talk about investing all the time, it's like, it's kind of easy to see what is happening or what's going to happen, but when is always a very difficult thing. And I think that's where a lot of these economists like the Harry Dents or whatever, they get it wrong because they're always trying to call a time, and it's really hard. And so what I like to say is like, imagine if I know you recently moved, I haven't been to your new house. And so you wrote down directions for me and you said, hey, when you get to this billboard, make a right. And then at the mailbox, make a left, go to the end of the fence and make another right. And you gave me directions like that, right? And you didn't tell me how long it was going to take me to get there or how far those distances were. But I had the map and I knew at the mailbox here and the billboard there, right? So that's kind of the way that I approach the markets. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get to your house, but I have the signs that I'm looking for. And as I'm getting closer to the signs, I realize that I'm getting closer to the destination. And so what I'm looking for, when does this whole monetary shift happen? When does the dollar die? When do we move into other assets, things like that? Instead of trying to predict the exact time, like it's going to be July of 2021, instead of trying to do that, like what a lot of economists do, I like to look at the signs. And so as I'm getting close to these signs, I realize I'm getting closer and closer to this event. And so back to the original question, obviously, we've seen debt is at an all-time high. Debt to GDP is at a level that's past where we can sustain it. We're at a debt to GDP of about 125% right now. Anytime we get over, a nation gets over 90% per what's known as the Keynesian multiplier, they're getting less growth for debt. So typically, right, in a time when the market dips, the government would step in with debt to try to fill that gap, to try to get the growth going again. But when you get over debt to GDP of 90%, you're getting less growth for the amount of debt you're spending. So, for example, we lost $1 trillion out of the economy. The government would hopefully spend 500 million, half of that amount in debt, injecting the system to get that $1 trillion of growth. The problem is today it's costing us 1.5 trillion to get 1 trillion of growth.
Wow.
And so we're at this unsustainable level. So these are all signs that we're looking for. But now we're seeing at the same time, Treasury yields, so what the government pays for people to borrow the money, the bonds, it's doubled since August. So that means there's not enough people willing to loan money to the government. People don't want to hold bonds.
Wow.
The market is speaking. It's doubled since August. Imagine if our house payment or our car payment, our interest rate doubled in 6 months or 7 months. Like, it would be unsustainable. Now imagine if you had $28 trillion worth of debt. And then you can play that out. So we're seeing at the same time that the debt is unsustainable, but they continue to need more to get even not enough growth. But then nobody wants to buy the debt. So this is two interesting things that are at play. One, nobody wants to buy the debt. That's why Treasury yields are going up. I think this morning they hit another high and they're like 1.25. I forget the exact number this morning. And then at the same time, the US dollar, which is the reserve currency of the world, still about 50 to 60% in reserves across the world, it's falling. Nobody wants to hold the dollar either. So the Dixie, which has measured the dollar against other currencies, is continuing to crash. And I say it's crashing because not only has it fallen about as far as it did in 2016, but it's done it in half the amount of time. And so not only is it how far things go down, but it's also how fast they go down. And so we've gone down twice as fast. Now, in 2016, it was a coordinated event. The governments around the world were having a sovereign debt crisis. The dollar was too strong. They couldn't afford to pay the debt back. And they asked the United States, hey, if you don't weaken the dollar, we can't pay the debt back. We're going to default. So the dollar coordinated to move it down. This time, it's not coordinated. It's happening by market forces. So at the same time, nobody wants to buy the debt, so yields are going up. And at the same time, nobody wants to hold dollars, and the dollar's going down. So these are signs that I'm looking for. And then on top of it, which we have now, of course, the Wall Street bets, the Reddit thing. And what that is it's also showing how society is now acting out, right? How society is acting out. And what was really important for me, what I saw was when I looked on the Reddit boards and I saw some of the posts of what people were saying. Mm-hmm. And they said they were the millennials. Now, the millennials grew up in the great financial crash. And so some of these, one of them, I remember, he said, I watched my parents lose everything. Mm-hmm. He said, I'll spend every penny I have just to stick it to the banks at all. Mm-hmm. And so we're having this whole society shift, these millennials that have grown up under this, and now they're pushing back on the financial institutions, and they're deciding to opt out. They don't want to buy the stocks. They're fighting against the stock market. All right. And they don't want to hold dollars anymore. We're seeing, gold and silver. I know you're into uranium. We're seeing lots of commodities, real tangible things. Obviously, Bitcoin, right, other outlets.
Bitcoin's at $50,000 earlier today.
Yeah. And so these are just all signs of what's happening. Other signs that we're looking for. And if you look at the kind of rise and fall of empires, the Roman Empire is a great illustration, but it's the response to that. So now what does the government do? They say, well, shoot, these retail traders are the problem. Just kind of like in 2008, it wasn't the banks that caused the problem. No, it was the individual mom and pops that bought the homes. They're the ones that caused the market crash, right? Forget the banks doing a quadrillion dollars of derivatives. And kind of the same thing, right? The Wall Street institutions are causing massive problems in the market, but they're saying, no, it's the retail investors. And now there's like more regulations. So they're talking about, now Robinhood says you can't do more than a couple trades unless you have a certain account balances. They're talking about, I've even seen them talking about making it where if you don't have a college education, maybe you shouldn't be investing.
No way.
Yeah. I mean, Senator Elizabeth Warren.
I don't have one.
She asked the SEC to start looking into setting what she calls fair market values for stocks. Whatever that is, and who decides what that is, right? So these are just signs that we're seeing, and what it does is it just continues to rapidly accelerate that pace. So that's all the things that I'm looking at. It's pretty interesting stuff.
Man, yeah, you're such a good teacher. You're really good at communicating a really seemingly esoteric and complex subject. So then let me ask you, so that's the overall thesis as to what's taking place, right? And then, on your live event, you're going into it more and how to prepare for it. But let me ask you, what are the results of that? But so when, to me, when I get that rhetoric from Warren, it's essentially just sounds like price controls to me. And exactly so what it is. What's the results of this all for us?
Yeah. So again, back to the science, right? So they'll move, the government will counter with price controls. So for example, there's the $15 federal minimum wage that they're putting out today, right? Again, this is when a government starts doing that, it starts signaling that the end is coming closer, right? They're trying to protect whatever's left, right? They realize it's slipping away. So they mandate this $15 federal minimum wage. And I saw some legislator, I forget what her name was, and she tweeted, and it sounded really smart at first. And she said, if we give everyone a $15 minimum wage, then prices are just going to go up. And it's effectively like they didn't get a raise at all. And I was like, wow, she actually gets it. But then she kept talking. And then she said, so what we have to do, is we have to make it where businesses can't raise their prices.
Oh my God.
And then it's like, what?
That's Venezuela now.
Yeah, right. And so what Elizabeth Warren's talking about with stock prices, fixing prices, what she's talking about with businesses not raising prices, that's fixing prices. And of course, what does that do? It's easy for us to know because we've seen this done dozens of times throughout history. Well, with certain prices now, if I have to pay people more, but I can't raise my prices, I'm not making money. So what do? I shut my business down. That leads to shortages of goods and shortages of products and things like that. So that is the signs that we're watching, and we've seen this game before, right? And so that's why I love to study history, because we know where this is going. But ultimately, where this really goes is when we have this societal shift, when we have this massive shift, a monetary shift. Unfortunately, most people are losers, right? Most people are losers, but some people win. And typically you'll see the elite, they're trying to angle in a way where they can maintain what they have. So yeah, super interesting stuff.
So what does it look like, right? Like you paint this picture and I just those things about how the bonds have increased and a lot of things that, I didn't know. And I think your average person doesn't know. And it paints a lot more. You make it fun and you laugh and stuff. So it's not really somber, but
that's so scary.
It is kind of like, well, whoa, what's going to happen here? So how does this end up when you say we're at the end of a cycle? What does that mean? We're at the end of a cycle. What's on the other side of that wall?
Well, some people say I talk too much doom and gloom. I don't want to be doom and gloom. And I try to have a message of hope because, if we navigate this correctly, it can work out pretty good for us. Unfortunately, for most people, as I said, it won't, right? But yeah, where does it end up? We're moving in this direction, and at some point, right, it has to shift. And so you talked about cycles. I mentioned Harry Dent earlier. He's kind of done this thesis where we have like these 3 cycles that are all converging. It's like a 20-year cycle, a 40-year cycle, and a 90-year cycle, and they're all converging right now. There's another one. It's called The Pendulum. It's a book called The Pendulum. And they talk about how every 40 years we have the pendulum swings from a me, which is individualism, decentralization, and it swings to a we, which is centralization or globalization. So every 40 years, the pendulum swings from a me to a we, and then it goes back again. And what's real interesting is I think next year we're peaking out on the globalism, the we, and we'll start rejecting that and moving back to a me. And this book has traced this back for thousands of years. We have the fourth turning, which I'm sure you've probably heard of, right? So that's kind of like I forget exactly how it goes. It's like good times bring hard times bring strong men bring good times bring weak men bring bad times. That's 4 cycles. Bad times bring strong men bring good times bring, right? And it just repeats. And so we're in that 4th cycle right now where we've had all this good time that's unfortunately created really weak men. And so it's interesting when you look at it from that scale where we have like 3 cycles converging together, the pendulum is swinging, the 4th cycle is turning, and it's all converging right now at the same time that we're witnessing all this stuff. It's kind of amazing. I know you're into that kind of stuff. So I can see the look on your eyes blowing your mind a little bit.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff, right? I mean, it's just fascinating. It's really interesting. 2, it's a little daunting, but 3, it's also exciting because, you've got Bitcoin, you've got miners, you've got commodities, you've got uranium, you've got crypto miners, you've got like all these things that present a really good opportunity. Businesses, online businesses, right? Like, yeah, there's a lot of interesting opportunity that's available to us. So give us an idea of what you're going into in the live event that you're going to be running online.
Yeah. So as you said, right, times of change create opportunities. And so for most people, they don't see those opportunities, and that's why they're kind of left out. But as you said, like, you're seeing these opportunities, and they're definitely out there. You talked about that stock that popped 85% today. So it becomes more dangerous, but if you navigate it correctly, it can become advantageous for you. And so really, I guess we'll be breaking down more into detail the specific things that we're seeing in the market, such as, the silver market was pumping, and it still is. I mean, there's still massive problems in that silver market. What does that mean for other markets? And so how do we want to position ourselves for that? I think one of the really big things that I really want to convey, and I'll teach more about, is that, for the last 40, 50 years, it was kind of like, get a good job, save for retirement, just always leave your money in the stock market. It always goes up, 60-40 split, 60% stocks, 40% bonds, like a passive investor. People work really, really hard to figure out how to make money, and then they just give it to someone else and don't think about it. And those days are over. Those days are over. The market's changing super fast. And so I believe we have to be tactically managing. We just have to be paying attention, reading those road signs on the way to your house, and making moves accordingly. And so we'll talk about what those signs are, how we can manage that. And I'm not talking about becoming a day trader. Investing should be sort of boring. It's but it's a little bit more exciting these days because more stuff is happening, but definitely not talking about being a day trader, nothing like that, but just paying attention, right? Like, you can't just pray and hold for 40 years. Like, it's just not going to work out well for you anymore. And so we'll talk about those changes, talk about how you can stay on top of it without having to, become a day trader. What types of assets are really going to be the ones that will take off during this transfer cycle? That kind of stuff.
Okay. So then let me ask you on this, right? Like, you're a really successful guy, and you've positioned yourself well in a lot of things, from Bitcoin to miners to, different businesses and things like that, very early, right? So you've seen a lot of returns. But let me ask you, as this unfolds more and more, barring a spike in the dollar, if it continues to move this way, and the social, economic, and political climates continue on this downward trend that they're in, and there's so much, there's more volatility, not only in the markets, but volatility just like with our actual savings and our actual net worth. And then there's fears of, like we've had Klaus Schwab talk about a financial terrorist attack that would be, 90% worse than the lockdowns and whatnot. Yeah. And so, you get to this point where I go, what is really smart, prepared people doing, or what's their plan to do, not in the next 12 months, hey, get in Bitcoin, get in this miner, but what's your plan 5 years to 10 years down the road? What's your goals for yourself and your family and your investments and your savings? And how do you see it playing out, or long-term shifts with what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question. And the unfortunate answer is we don't really know, right? Yeah. We don't know what the future holds. And so, again, back to the old buy and hold and pray for 40 years and put your money away, like that's done, because the future is so uncertain right now. And so uncertainty causes people to act differently. So, for example, if I knew that I was going to live in this house for the rest of my life and I was going to die here and my kids were going to be secure and nothing was going to change, then I could really start planning ahead. But let's say that all of a sudden war breaks out here and I got to grab my kids and we have to run by foot and we have to migrate to Europe, for example, which was what happens in the Middle East, right? All the time. And so if I'm in the Middle East and I'm having to flee Syria and I don't know where I'm going to end up, my future is so uncertain. How saving is the last thing I'm even thinking about. You see what I'm saying? So that's two ends of the spectrum. And unfortunately, we're moving to the very uncertain end of the spectrum. And so that long-term planning becomes very difficult, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So we have what we want to happen, but we have to manage for what is happening. So it's really hard to say what am I going to be doing exactly in 5 or 6 years? But I would say that that's why I said we have to kind of be more tactical about it. And we have to kind of be paying attention and moving. But if I'm going to put my crystal ball on the table and predict of what I can, obviously the trend has been for the last, as I said, the pendulum has been swinging for 40 years of moving towards this globalism and more totalitarian control, right? In the United States specifically, under 9/11, we had the Patriot Act. We lost more freedoms in one single day than any time in history. Of course, through the pandemic, we've lost even more freedoms. Even more extreme, China with their social credit systems and all that stuff. So governments are moving towards this more totalitarian control. And at what point do they wake up and say, we have too much control. Why don't we give some freedom back to our people? Like, at what point do they wake up and say that?
Never.
Like, why would they, right? So what ultimately changes that? What will break that trend? In my opinion, what breaks that trend is competition, right? So we have two systems, and people want to talk about capitalism and socialism and communism and fascism and all these isms, and it gets caught up in these words. And really, we have two systems. We have one that's a captured, controlled, centrally planned, and we have a free, open, competitive. And we both know that when competition brings better service, better products, better prices. Competition always wins. That's why the DMV sucks, because there's no competition for the DMV. They don't care, right? But we're seeing right now, Texas, Florida are out competing New York and California for businesses, and businesses are going there. Now, so many people have left California. So many businesses have left California to go to Texas that the governor is being recalled right now. He's losing his job. And we have Chamath stepped in. Hey, I'll be the governor and I'll take California taxes to zero. You see, because of the competition, they're forced to relax their grip of totalitarianism. But what about when nations start competing?
Yeah.
And so that's really where I think things will happen. And it's actually starting to happen pretty fast. So yesterday, I can't believe this, Macron, who's the president of France, who I'm not a fan of, he's a big-time globalist and a big-time controller. He came out and put the United States on blast yesterday. And he said, all of that left intersectionality, racial divide, we don't want any of that. You guys are lost your mind. I'm paraphrasing here. He said, your universities are indoctrination camps and it's ruining your country. And we don't want any of that to come to France. He said, in France, you're either French or you're not French. I was like, what? So we're starting to see countries, and that will create competition. The president of Brazil also, I think yesterday as well, was talking about how he will not be taking their citizens' privacy away, their freedoms away. They are not doing these COVID restrictions and all these things. And obviously, you know, DeSantis in Florida has done the same thing. And so it's going to create that competition. And that is what I hope for, right? That's the hope that we have for the future. That competition will break things. But I guess, how do we navigate? The question that you're probably asking is, how do we navigate from here to there? And the answer is, one, we're playing a game. Most people have been playing a game in the stock market, the bond market, financial markets, but the person we're playing against changes the rules in their favor all the time. Like, how can I play with you when you're constantly changing the rules? Like in that Wall Street Bets game, for example, they lost too much money. Was it $5-6 billion? And so let's just halt trading. Like, what? like, you know what I mean? So how can you play a game with someone who's constantly changing the rules? Well, the answer is you don't play the game with them. That's the answer. You don't play the game with them. And so there's lots of ways that we can build our wealth. We can maintain our wealth. We can preserve our purchasing power without playing that game with them. So that would be the one way that we do that. And I think that really goes into scarce assets, hard, real, tangible things, and in a way that things can be somewhat portable, so we can play this competition game if we need to at some point.
Yeah, Dave Portnoy had a funny joke. He was saying it's like being in the middle of the Super Bowl, and at the end of the second quarter, the team just calling the game and saying they changed the rules and they were up, so the game's over. And I thought it was a funny analogy. I did not see that about the France president, but it's one of the things that I'm hopeful about, is that, because I'm so concerned. I'm thinking strongly about actually, not just going to Puerto Rico, literally leaving America, because I'm just not optimistic about it. But one of the things that makes me optimistic is this country competition. And I've talked about this to another guest, and it gives me a lot of hope, whether it's countries that say, you've had countries and cities discussing storing reserves in Bitcoin, storing reserves in gold. Then you have countries saying, hey, we're not going to restrict your freedom. And if you start getting all these aspects, from currencies to freedoms, competition, you may end up actually birthing some pretty incredible places to live.
Yeah.
And so it makes me excited and optimistic, because I'm worried having a daughter.
And and to that point, and so, I mean, we're already seeing it. The California example is perfect, right? They've lost so many people; they're having to now lighten back up. And when so many people move to another country, that country will have to lighten back up. But here's the thing: so I'm quite a bit older than you. I grew up when I was in high school. The Soviet Union fell, the USSR fell, the Berlin Wall fell. So like I kind of grew up under that, with the Berlin Wall and communism and all that, and when I was younger, I had lots of friends, not lots, but several friends that had come to the United States that were escaping oppressive countries, Iran, Afghanistan. Some of my best friends moved from South Africa. And when they left those oppressive countries, they came to a more free country, America, right? America outcompeted them. And when they came, here's the thing. When they came penniless, because they couldn't take their real estate with them. They couldn't take their gold with them. They couldn't even take the money in their bank, because the government puts capital control laws in. Go to your bank and try to wire money. Like, I know you do a lot of investing stuff like I do. I tried to wire 6 figures to Canada for a deal, a silver mining deal that I was getting into. It took me an hour. I had to go through interviews. I had to call to this. I had to get authorization. I didn't have time. I had to leave. I couldn't even get the wire done. They wouldn't let me send 6 figures of my own money to Canada. And that's because capital control. So, if the country says, hey, sure, go ahead to that other country, but we keep all your wealth, then there's not really a big advantage. But what happens when I can keep my own wealth sovereign and I can take my wealth with me? Now that changes the whole game. Mm-hmm. A lot of people might have gone from South Africa to the US, but they didn't want to go penniless, so they stayed. And the people that did go, the state still won because they kept all the wealth. But what if I take all my wealth with me? And so that's what really accelerates this trend. It's the only thing that really allows this trend to really take off, accelerate. And so that's my big hope for the future, if we don't end on a doom and gloom note.
No, we won't. That's very interesting. I have to admit, now that I'm considering leaving America, the thing about Bitcoin, it provides a different value to me than I thought before considering leaving, because it obviously can be one of those things that can allow you to shape shift into a different, region. And that's also why Robert Kiyosaki went on my channel last time. And he's like, I don't even have an ounce of gold or silver in America. Like the very high net worth people have it in the Caymans and those types of things. So if things ever get bad, they have their crypto or their metals outside of the country already. But let me ask you, let's shift gears here. And it's an area I like to discuss a lot. And for everyone that's still listening, if you haven't yet, be sure to sign up to Mark's free event coming up next Thursday. The link's in the description and pinned to the comments right there. Obviously, Mark's wealth of knowledge and very well prepared. And also just you're a very good teacher.
Thank you.
Which is different than someone doing good results. You're also able to communicate it really effectively, which obviously is important. And so I'm excited about your event. For everyone, it's right there down below in the description and comments for free sign up. But let me ask you philosophies and mindsets, right? Because there's people that listen to this, right? And they know what's happening and they're saying, okay, how do I prepare myself or my family better? Let's talk a little bit about the most important mindsets or philosophies that you think are essential for this, coming decade or this kind of end of this cycle, as you've said it.
Yeah, I love talking about that stuff because it's so important. Really, the mental edge is everything. I mean, if you look at sports, what really separates the elite sport athletes or the top business people is really just that mental edge. To that note, I have a new coach that I just hired. We're meeting later this week, and I'm really trying to sharpen my own mental edge. So it's important. We have to understand that mentally, us as humans, we're horrible investors because of our our mental problems. So one of them is what we suffer from, normalcy bias. And so everybody thinks that whatever is normal will always continue being normal. So you can call it recency bias too, but it's like normalcy bias. So what that means is everybody's like, during this pandemic, it's going to go right back to normal. It's going to be okay. It's like, no, the world has changed. The world we're going into is not the world we're coming out of, but everybody expects us just to go back to normal. Another example would be the stock markets have been going up for a decade. So the stock market will always keep going up, right? Your financial advisor would say, hey, look, for the last 50 years or the last 80 years, if you would have just stayed in stocks, you would have made money. Okay. But that's a bias that we have, that we think that whatever is happening will always continue happening. And unfortunately, it's not the truth. We can look at history and it tells us otherwise. So that's definitely one of those. Another one that people suffer from is maybe the other flip side of that is confirmation bias. And so a lot of times we have an idea in our head and I think gold's the best thing in the world and bet gold's the only thing that's going to work and no other asset in the world. I'm going to put all my money in gold. And so I'm looking for information that confirms my bias for that. Mm-hmm. And anything that tells me anything otherwise, I don't want to look at. And so I see this. I mean, I have my channel and I'm sure you see the same. I see thousands of comments a week. And I see so many people that are so entrenched in their one idea mm-hmm. and it limits them. And they don't see the blind spots that are there. Right. And so it's that confirmation bias. They're always trying to confirm what they think and they're rejecting other things. So I think people have to realize that things do change. Just because this is how the way it has been doesn't mean it's the way it will be. So that's one. And then the second one, like I said, is don't get stuck in that confirmation bias. Look for other information. Be open to that. I know you had moved from California. You're up on the beach, surfer. I'm a surfer. I chase big waves all around the world. I have a jet ski here and we take it out to Mexico just to go chase big waves. And that's super dangerous, right? Super dangerous. People can die easy. But there's a reward, but there's also a risk, right? And so you do everything that you can to mitigate those risks. I'm not going to just pretend that everything's going to be okay. I'm going to understand that there's a downside and I'm going to protect against that. So I'll have life jackets and I'll have somebody on the ski and I'll have a sled in the water and we'll have other people watching and we'll use colorful boards to see where we're at in the water. Like all these things that we'll do to protect the downside, the what if something happens, right? And so I think people need to kind of think more like that when it comes to their investments, where it's like, hey, we're hoping for the best, but we're planning for the worst. We're open. We have an open mind to these different things that could happen, that there could be better ways. And so anyway, yeah, those are a couple mindset tips that I would give that I think are huge.
I have to admit that's really changed my life and improved it a lot. Right. I guess that's adaptability in a fixed versus a growth mindset. And it seems to be a common thing that a lot of really successful people try to, teach us. And I finally grasp it because I've interviewed Rick Rule every month for almost a year. And
wow.
I treat these all like mentor calls, basically.
Sure.
I mean, and he knows me pretty well off air too. So he said to me on air one day, basically you have such a bias towards metals that you're actually missing out on other things. And that's basically what I had. And I was like, he's right. And so I shifted things around on a dime because he just like kind of poured cold water on an interview. And I made some shifts into getting big into crypto miners, way bigger into uranium. And it's easily made me since I made these shifts, most of these uranium stocks are up 200-300%. And a lot of these crypto miners, I'm up, a lot on those too. And while silver's been, stagnant, and having that shift almost instantly improved the quality of my life and the quality of my finances.
Yeah.
And in other ways that manifests is people think that just buying gold or just buying Bitcoin, that's how they're going to become free in life. And in a lot of ways, they're doing it on little to no income or not increasing income.
Yeah.
And so I always preach about having a business. You come on my channel the first time and you said, it's so important.
Yep.
And I think that one of the issues is we're kind of conditioned and trained to be afraid of the unknown, and then we're conditioned to stay where we are, and then the fear of failure or rejection or it not working out, or things like I don't know how or I don't know what to do. So can you break down a little bit on the mindset that is important? As you said since you said earlier, people get so stuck on gold, so stuck on Bitcoin, so stuck on one asset class. And one of the most important ways we could shift that is probably to develop a new income source. So how do you get over the fear of thinking you're not good enough, or the fear of it not working out, or just the fear of being overwhelmed? How do you get over those hurdles to develop a new income source?
Well, I think it's easier probably said than done, but I mean, I think you need to have a growth mindset as opposed to maybe a growth or abundance mindset compared to a scarcity mindset. So and it's just one of my core values, but I just love to always be growing. And maybe not everybody does, but you could start to develop that muscle a little bit. So start reading. Start watching videos on YouTube. Start listening to podcasts. I mean, most people watching this video already are, which is why they're watching this video. And so just dig into that, right? Continue to grow, continue to learn, continue to expand. Robert Kiyosaki, I think it was in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I read like 25 years ago. He talked about how if your brain is like a cup and you can fill your brain up with information, but what you really need is you need to get rid of this cup and you need to get a bigger cup. And so that's what we're talking about, expanding your mind so that then you can fill it up with even more information. So that'd be one way to do that. The other thing that I do, and when I talk to a lot of other people and I'm like, oh man, this is a perfect idea. You could grow your business this way. You could do this. You could invest in this, whatever. And they instantly say, well, yeah, but this could happen and this bad thing could happen and this bad thing can happen. And my response is, yeah, and they will. They will. So what? Right. So going back, so it's like everyone wants to talk themselves out of it because they see the risks and everything. Well, I could start this business, but this would happen. And I start this and this would happen. And so I don't want to try. Whereas I go into it knowing that those things are going to happen and I'm okay with it. And so that's just a little subtle shift, right? Like I know that those problems are going to be there, but I'm willing to push through those problems to get the reward, whereas other people aren't. And so I think there's that little mind shift. On a side note, anybody watching this, I'd highly recommend it, including you, Jake. On Amazon, I don't know what channel it is, just search it. But there's a show called Undercover Billionaire. And everybody needs to go watch that show specifically for this conversation that we're having. Okay. Glenn Stearns last year, so we're on the season 2 right now, but season 1, this billionaire living on a mega yacht and everything, helicopters. He made a bet with someone. You could blindfold me, drop me anywhere in the United States with $100 in my pocket, with no contacts. I can't use my real name and nothing. And within 90 days, I'll build $1 million business. And they dropped him. Go watch season 1. They dropped him in like Pennsylvania in the middle of the winter, in the middle of nowhere. He was sleeping in a truck. He got sick with hypothermia, had to go to the hospital. He started finding trash and selling it and worked his way, and he did it. Oh, spoiler alert. Now season 2, Grant Cardone's on it, and I've only a couple episodes in, but COVID broke out during their filming. And just as he was gaining momentum, he had to go home for a while, came back, and all his momentum he had built was lost. Then he has COVID. That's where I'm at right now. And he should just quit. I mean, he has COVID, right? And now he only has 90 days to build a $1 million business, or he has to put up $1 million. Now he's at like day 15, day 20, and he's got COVID. He has to take 10 days off. And now he's like, this is what everybody goes through, and I'm going to do it regardless of those circumstances. So anyway, back to that point, anything that could go wrong is going wrong with them right now, and they're all pushing through. So go watch that show. It's pretty cool.
I saw Grant promoting it, but I have not checked it out. You made it sound a lot more interesting than just
good. Everybody should watch
140 characters does. So then let me ask you, right, because I guess that goes into, we're also going into this time of uncertainty. I firmly believe the most important thing anyone can have is a cash flow business that's also, hopefully increasing in revenue for a lot of reasons. One, obviously, because that means growth, but 2, because obviously if inflation picks up, just what we used to make may not buy us what we used to. And we may end up to be able to buy your freedom in this kind of totalitarian system that's building. You may need more money than you think. And so then let me ask you in conclusion, what would you suggest to someone that says, all right, Mark, I'm fired up. What you said makes sense. Because I always like to end these, right? Like we talked about this big, overwhelming thing at the beginning, but I've tried to make this channel as practical and useful. And so everyone doesn't leave like, having to go change their pants. They leave inspired. And so what would you say for someone listening that says like, Mark, everything you're saying makes perfect sense. Yeah, I'll go on your live event. Yeah, I'll start a business. Yeah, I'll buy this investment or that. But my goal is this. I'm concerned, but I'm going to channel that into positive energy and motivation. How do I get going? What do I do?
Well, it depends on where you're at, right? So this whole narrative that's taken over for the last 9 months that we're all in this together is just false. It's just false. We're not in this together. You and I are not the same. And I believe America is great because of individualism, right? Because we're all individual and we're creative and we solve different problems. So we're not in this together. And so that's unfortunately not a one size fits all answer, because you may be in a different place with a different level of income, a different level of education, a different level of interest than I am. And your destination is different than the destination I want to go to. But what I would say to try to put a blanket over that is that it always starts with investing back into yourself. I have a lot of people said, Mark, how do I start? I don't even have $1,000 to invest. Where should I start investing? I'd like, go buy yourself a course. That's what you need to buy. You need to invest. You need your education. You have to figure out how to make more money first. So I would say it starts with pouring back into your own education, which I already talked about, right? Watching podcasts, videos like you're doing right now, reading books, but really pour into your education. So back to that Undercover Billionaire, they didn't have any money, no contacts. They couldn't even use their real name. What did they have? They had their education. They had their knowledge. That's what they had. It's the only tool they had was their knowledge. And so build your knowledge. You can do that for pretty much free. It doesn't cost you any money, but it takes a little bit of effort. The second thing is always look for ways you can provide value. You get paid for the value that you provide, period. That's it. So if you want to make more money, you have to go provide more value. That's it. So back to Grant Cardone, he went to this guy's company. I don't want to spoil the whole thing. And he said, hey, I'm going to do a promotion for you. I'm going to bring you $15,000 of sales. And I'm not asking for a penny. I'm going to do it for free. And he did. After he brought him about $12,000 in sales, he said, "Hey, now do you want me to keep going? Give me a $10,000 advance." And the guy cut him a check for 10 grand. But he went and provided value first. He solved the massive need provided. So anyway, how can you provide value? Build up your education. Now, each one of us have different wants, needs, desires. To do that, I typically like to say, go as close to the money supply as you can get. So that'd be sales and marketing. If someone can bring me, just like Grant Cardone, he brought him $15,000 in sales. The guy gave him 10 grand back. If I could bring you, Jake, $1 million, would you give me 100,000 of that? Like, of course you would, right? And so the way that I can do that is through sales and marketing. So that could be Facebook ads, YouTube ads. That could be through graphic design, campaign management, copywriting. I mean, there's a million things that it could be done, but like focusing on that, because that's where I can provide the most value. If that helps.
Yeah, the other way you could go close to the money is to sleep with a politician. So, but I'm not sure how quickly we'd be able to actionable step that one. So let me ask you then, what are you most looking forward to, excited about, grateful for right now in life?
Well, I have a family, so I love my family. My kids are getting older now, which is kind of a sad thing, but like there's a lot of joy in seeing them kind of develop into their own person as well. So that's something that I'm just having fun with. I'm trying to live in the moment with that. You also know that I've recently moved from California to Puerto Rico. So there's this whole brand new world in front of me that I don't know yet. And I'm figuring it out, and I'm figuring out where the investment opportunities are, where the money's being made in Puerto Rico. I'm building out my contacts. So there's that whole exciting world that I'm kind of digging into there. So those are probably the big areas kind of on the front. The big thing that gives me hope, like I said, is really I'm trying to do my part to expand people's education. So that's what I talk about on my channel all the time. You've talked about how I'm a good teacher, and I appreciate that. But really, as I'm saying, people need to expand their education. I'm doing my part. And what I'm really excited about is that people are really receptive to it.
Yeah.
Like our channels are growing massive because people are hungry for information. And so it's the decentralization of information that has all of a sudden created this like renaissance where like people are like ready to learn, and that is going to change the world. That's going to have massive implications as more and more people expand their thinking, build their education, and go out in the world to solve problems, to go out in the world to provide value. And I think it's going to be a renaissance that we're going into because of that.
Yeah, exciting stuff. I do have to agree, and it does give me a lot of hope. The internet's really, and every time the politicians in these Davos crowds shows their hand, it goes viral, and it's just more people wake up. Whether you've always identified as a Democrat or a Republican or a gold person or a crypto person or a traditional 9-to-5, it's like everyone's kind of like, I think, slowly realizing we're actually all on the same team, and that's exciting to me as well. So we're all
human beings. We're all human beings. And, it's like, right now we're seeing this narrative being pushed where everybody's trying to be the most oppressed. Well, I'm a minority. I'm a colored skin. I'm a colored, and I'm a woman. I'm a colored, I'm a woman, and I'm a gay. I'm a colored, a woman, a gay, and a transsexual. I'm a colored woman, gay. And it's like, it's a race to the bottom. It's like, how about we're all just humans? Like, how about that? And there is this narrative that's pushing that way. And unfortunately, the elites are trying to push us down that dark, divided path. But yeah, I'm hopeful for the future, and I'm excited for it.
Same. All right. So for everyone listening, the link's right there down below for Mark's live event that's coming up online right there down below. It's in the description and comments. Give us a final summary of what we can expect at the event, and final sign off.
Yeah, I would say just if you want to learn more about some of the road signs that we're watching, and more specifically, do you turn right or left when you see the road sign, what to do, then that's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover the road signs. We're going to cover which way to turn at which road sign that we're facing, give you actionable tips of exactly how you can navigate this so you end up on the right side of the wealth transfer and not the wrong side.
Absolutely. So for everyone listening, please make sure you hit the like button on the right side, right over there, the left side, right over on this side to send this out to more people, and give us a comment down below. Let us know one thing you learned from this video. And in the comments, in the description is a link to Mark's event coming up. So thank you for watching this video, and thanks for coming on, Mark.
Thanks so much, Jake. Appreciate it.